start recording, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Teach us what you know.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Tony. I adore you. And I think that is a great segue into what do we need to talk about today? Now, there's usually a couple things that keeps people from really moving forward in their speaking career, their career in general. And a lot of times people really have a challenge with both of these. One of them is usually one that women have more of an issue with than guys. And that is, we want everyone to like us. And it was so hard for me to get over this. Okay, so I totally get where everyone comes from, and you're like, what is there not to like? I mean, what do I need to change? Because I must be doing something wrong. As if it's all internal, it's all about us. When I started really realizing, especially speaking, that there's always about 25% of the people that never wanted to connect. And then I realized those people just don't like me. And so it was like my duty to make them like me. But then I had this kind of aha moment one time when I was talking to two people that were at an event before I got on stage. One of them was like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I need to hear. Oh my gosh, you're so amazing. And the other person was like, what? What do you mean? I don't think so. I mean, it was like this two different personalities. So when I got up, and of course, because of all the crap in my past, I have a tendency to gravitate to negativity. And so there they were, the lady who loved me, the guy who was like, blah. And I was trying to get him to like me. Oh, he's going to like me before I get off the stage. And I started really looking at what was the change that needed to happen. Of course, I thought it was myself. All of a sudden, I glimpsed over at the lady, and she had this huge smile, and she was writing feverishly what I was saying. And I glanced back over to the guy, and his hands were still crossed, and he had this kind of attitude, prove it, right? You could just tell. He's like doubting everything I had to say. And then I was like, oh my gosh, why am I focused on him when I have this person who really wants the information? Then I just started looking at, why do I always try to make the people who don't like me when I don't even like them, right? I mean, why am I so focused on trying to make people like me that I don't even like? And that was like this big moment, and I changed everything at that moment. When I go speak someplace, or I walk into a networking group, or I go to a conference, or I just pick up the phone and I'm talking to someone new, I know that 25% of the people, we are not going to connect. We are not going to be the best buds. It's okay. Thank them for their time. Move on, right? The best two buttons ever invented was the block and the delete button. Use them generously, right? The top 25%, you want to love on them. You want to bring them in because that is your true community. Now, let's have this discussion. What if you're looking at that 25% and they don't feel right? That top 25% who love you, they are like, is this the community I'm wanting to build for myself? So I did this. It was in 2007. I looked around and I had built this huge community in the Austin area, and I had all these networking groups, and I was like, wait a moment. Why am I attracting all these broke whiners? Have y'all ever had that moment of, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by people that I don't want around me? And I was like, oh, this is my issue. This is what I'm bringing to the table is I'm attracting the people that there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not saying there's something wrong, but it's not who I wanted to flourish in my community. Because then they would bring people to my group and those people would be like them, right? Because everyone really kind of hangs around the same type of people. So at that moment, I completely changed the way I did things. So I created rules for my business, for my life, for my social media, for everything. And that's what you need to do. Instead of looking at who's my target market. So if I ask, who's your target market, to a group of 100 people, they'll all raise their hand and go, I'm looking for women between the age of 45 and 65 that make over $80,000 a year. Stop it. Stop the craziness. Instead, look at what values do they hold? Because that's truly the community that you're wanting to draw to you. It's when people have the right, really soul-searching, same values. Now you can figure out what your rules will be by what is your biggest pet peeves. What is the biggest pet peeves? Sorry, I had to yell at my husband. So what is the rules that you want to create for your business, your life? Now, you have to want to agree to the rules yourself. You can't make rules for other people and then not do them yourself. Usually rules come up from your biggest pet peeves. Like, what is the things that it just drives you nuts when people break them? So my first rule is you have to be nice. No mean, grumpy, negative people are allowed. And I do kick people out if they break that rule. But then that also requires me to be nice, right? I can't suddenly go on social media and start blasting somebody. There's been 2 times that I've said something that I would consider not really nice because they were either attacking me or something, right? And I felt like I needed to say something. So I always start off with, I know this is unusual, but I need to say this. And boy, people really react to that, right? Because they're like, this must be serious. Let's see what Tanya's going to say, but she never does this. So it's okay when you have to break your rules, you just let people know. My second rule came across because I have a speech impediment. It's a little bit like dyslexia. So when I would send out an email or have things up on my website, I would misspell things. Grammar, I'm an English major. I could edit anybody else's stuff but my own. So when I would send out an email, I'd usually get all these emails back. They're like, oh, you spelled there instead of there, or here instead of here, or we're not sure what this word was supposed to be. And I started realizing that I can't be perfect. And I started realizing the people that were wanting me to fit in that perfection mode, right, especially in presenting, I could not do it. And so I was driving myself nuts on something that actually was not me. And so that's when I came up with my second rule is no perfect people, please. The perfection people need to stay away from me. They drive me nuts because they are trying to push their value of perfection on me, and I just don't play that game. So what is your hardcore line rules? And then you should have it on your website. It should be like all over the place. When people talk about you, that's what they should be talking about. That this is your community. Now, you often sometimes still gravitate to the other side. And you have to kind of realign yourself. So every once in a while, you have to look around at your community, say, does this community fit? When you show up, do you just revel in the community you built? So for example, my conferences for the Public Speakers Association, every year. We get together once a year and we have a blast. We're all like, what can we do with each other? How can we help each other? You know, it's just like this huge group of like-minded people that are super nice, right? And that are completely imperfect. So one year I went to my conference and it was not that way. Everyone was like transactional and they were like, what's in it for me? And how can you do this for me? And me. And I'm like, what happened? Why are all of these people showing up? And of course, I always look into myself. What did I do to create this community? I can't blame other people. It's only me building my own community. And then I realized at the beginning of that year, because this was about June, July, the beginning of the year, my house was completely destroyed from a weird water pipe bust that while I was on vacation and came home, and it was literally raining inside my house. Ah! And then my husband had gone blind, and our whole world changed at that moment. So I started slipping into a negative space. And I didn't really realize it, but then I started gravitating to people that had kind of a different slant, more of a negative slant to their business. And they were more focused on the me and the now and what's in it for me and bleh. And I didn't really realize it until I got to my conference, because I had started pulling their people from their conferences to mine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been attracting the wrong people. So I quickly readjusted, canceled a bunch of speaking opportunities with people they had introduced me to, because usually people who introduce people, it's the same type of people. Had some hard conversations with some that was like, okay, so I'm always looking at coming in and being there the whole time. What do you think about that? Oh, nobody ever comes in early. And, you know, usually people come in 30 minutes before and then they leave right after they speak. And I'm like, yeah, I need to go ahead and cancel my presentation. If you're looking to be a speaker, there's two types of speakers, and you have to decide which camp, because it's going to depend on what kind of community you're going to build. There's the transactional speakers and the relationship speakers. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with either, but they are different types of people. So you just have to be really honest with yourself and understand that when you go after that group and be a part of that group, that's really what you're going to get. So I realized that the people that are transactional are just there to gobble up as much as possible, to get in, get out. And it's really not about relationships. It's not like, you know, Tony and I are always talking about long-term relationships. What is in it for everyone involved? Now, sure, there's some times that you're can't stay the whole time. Things happen, but on a whole, what is your viewpoint? Now, I'm a big believer in relationship. That's the kind of speaker I am. The kind of people that I want in my organization is the relationship speakers. These are people who come in early. They are also helping promote the events. They're all about how can we help and share in the experience. They're there for the audience to change their lives. And then, yes, make some money, but also let's have this conversation a lot longer. Let's really develop strong relationships. So that's the arena camp that I love playing in. You just have to decide, what kind of camp do you want? Now, and a lot of times people are looking at, you know, kind of growing themselves. They usually start local, right? Because that's a very comfort zone. And for me, when I started going and getting out of my comfort zone, I mean, I was such a huge introvert. And I know it's hard to believe, but it's so true. So I love showing people the picture. If you've never seen this is a shocker. Just be prepared. So this was me in 2005 as an introvert. And to prove I was an introvert, this is what I wore to a holiday gala. Yeah, ladies, gala outfit. Mm. So I love showing that because it shows transition. It shows that there's growth involved, right? We don't all start off at the top. Everyone wants to start without any work and any personal development, because that's really the work, right? Yeah, you can get a website. Yeah, you get your programs together. But the real challenge is the personal development you have to do. So you start off with your local community. You become one of the top networked persons in your community. Then you're like, okay, it's time to go even further. Then you start branching out to the communities outside of that immediate area. And then you start stretching yourself statewide. Now, Rhode Island, you don't count. You have to go, at least into Massachusetts, all right? But if you're in a larger state, you can start stretching out statewide. And then, by the time you start going into other states, you're pretty much national. Okay, because most people, when you start reaching out beyond the state, whatever state you're in, you're starting really to look at a national approach. And then if you're like myself, you start looking international. I started looking international about a year and a half ago, and that's why we've got our conference for the Public Speakers Association in London this next year. So I'm looking for speakers for that. So a lot of times people have a hard time with that approach, going from their local community out. I could always tell you, once I went outside of my local community, people are like, wow, you're who? You're doing what? They were always more surprised and excited than people in my city, because they all knew me. And what was also challenging is, because you're going through personal development, they remembered me this way. They could never imagine me this way. Okay. So as you develop yourself and you become more well-known and you're more successful, you got to get away from your city, because they can only imagine you as an equal in their eyes and wherever you started off, which is usually at the bottom. So that's why you've got to reach out and do things in other cities, in other areas, and virtual, right? Connecting to people everywhere. Now, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging. It's hard to get booked nationally until you're booked nationally. That's why Tony's opportunities, I've got regional conferences throughout the US this coming year and Canada. And then my international one. So it gives you an opportunity to go to another whole city. You're like, oh, I'm going to go to, Tony's Chicago event. Woo! I am, all the way in Illinois. Now this is what people don't do well. Promote what you're doing. If you haven't promoted that you're speaking on this, how are people going to know you're speaking unless you actually tell them that you're speaking or you're doing business with? Most people have no clue what you even do, because you might have never even said it, unless you were pitching, right? You were throwing up, oh, I'm at this program. You need to be in this program. I've got this program. Okay, too much. So you've got to also tell them why you're so impressive. So you got to start talking about the national events. Virtual is international. Anybody could be here. There was a couple people that are scheduled to be on that's actually international. So you start connecting with people internationally, but also nationally. And then you get booked. Now, a lot of times people don't want to pay to speak. And I'm like, do you realize putting on my conference in London cost me about $20,000 to $25,000? That's a lot of money and a lot of time for me to put it on. So we all share in the opportunity to have it work, to make it happen, right? That's why the model of speaking has changed, because people are tired of putting on a big event for someone to fly in, gobble up everything, and then fly out and never help. We've all got to be involved with each other. We've all got to kind of be in this realm as a unit. Now, last thing before I get going. So we talked about, filtering and really figuring out who your core value kind of customers are. Looking at what camp that you're going to play in, and then starting to reach out and branch out into that superstar that you need to be, right? And that everyone's waiting for you to be if you haven't got there yet. So the next part is even a little bit harder. And that is to start asking people what they see in you. That's so amazing. Because they may have an idea of a place for you to go speak at. Now, I just told a lady about speaking at a corporation because I'm developing a whole resource for corporate and government trainings and corporate kind of executive coaching type of things. She had never thought of herself as a corporate speaker, corporate trainer. She's always dealt with families, but her subject is perfect for corporate. But the fear is bubbling, right? I don't know if I fit. I've never worked in corporate. Blah, 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 right? We put all of this crap in our head of why we're not good enough to do blankety blank when I was just telling her she is. So when you talk to people and you tell them about what you do, say, where would you think I would fit? Do you have any connections? And then as soon as they say something, don't discount it, because this is what happens, right? I'm like, oh, you should go speak with, blank blank. And they're like, oh, well, no, that's not really my target market. I mean, as soon as I say it, and I'm like, then why'd you ask? Right? So we get, and I've totally been there. That's why I can talk about this like to the cows come home, because Tanya has played in this place. I've denied things that were obviously perfect because we have all these fears that whelm up in us. The craziest one is when I got connected with a gentleman who has forever been in Asia. And he's like, you need to speak in Asia, Tanya. And I'm like, I do? Oh my gosh. And then all of these little, right? Y'all have that, right? You're like, well, this could be great, but no, this is so scary. Oh, I know. I don't speak Asian. Oh my God. How do I do that? And then I have to squash that. I said, tell me more. What do you mean? Give me examples, right? If someone's got an idea for you, dive into it. Explore it, make it, wow, I never thought about that before. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do it, because people sometimes have great ideas that just really doesn't fit you, or maybe it takes you to a whole different area. Like I had a whole group that wanted me to talk about poverty because I come from poverty. I could talk about the mindset and everything, but I had to stop and go, is that really where I want to take me in my business? And I decided that really wasn't. So sometimes people have great ideas and you just thank them. Say, oh, that was really a great idea. I'll put that in the back burner. And then there's sometimes that you're like, can you help me with that? Do you have connections to that? Where could I take that? Right? So just expand and pull things from yourself. Explore the possibilities. Always connect. When you feel somebody, yes, I did say feel. When you feel somebody and they're like, oh, I love that person, did you connect with them? Right? Did you reach out and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'd love to chat with you? Right? With no agenda, that you just wanting to get to know them, and then see where it goes. Explore possibilities. And sometimes it's not right away. I've been talking to an incredible woman down in Houston market for quite some time. And I went to a little event and she was there and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Tanya, I haven't seen you in like, what, 4 years?" I'm like, "I know." And she remembered me. And I remembered her and remembered how well we got along. And then all of a sudden, we start chatting. And then it's been about 6 months now and we're working on what do we want to do together. So don't also expect everything to just flower immediately. Sometimes things have to kind of gurgle and burble, you know what I mean. And you just never know where it's going to happen. So I'd love for everyone to go check out my website, Public Speakers with an S Association, all spelled out.com. We are running a Labor Day special through the 15th. So you still have a few days to take advantage of that. So you get half off of membership. And so you put in the coupon code Labor Day half off. And then that just flags me when I process your application to take half off. And if you'd like to have a chat, just message me and I'd love to. Thanks.
All right, Tanya, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions and then we're going to open it up to anyone else who has some questions. Can you talk a little bit, and you sort of mentioned this, talk a little bit about transactional speakers, because you and I have had numerous conversations on transactional speakers and what that entails. And to me, and you said there's nothing wrong with transactional speaking, but you have to know what kind of speaker you are. So for me, I am not a transactional speaker. I actually, even though I hate networking, I really do enjoy connecting with people and sticking around after my talk and before my talk and just sort of finding out what people need and then trying to help them with that. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, you know what a lot of times speakers don't look at is they always look at what is the attendees, what can I get out of the attendees? And really when you're a relationship speaker, what happens is you're not looking at it as just what can you get out of them, but how can you really support them and develop relationships with them. But more important also with the event people, the person putting on the event, with the sponsors, the vendors. It's like the whole accumulation of people. And for me, the value isn't just the sell, especially if you've got the opportunity to sell at the event. It's really on the things that happen at an event that would never have happened if you weren't there and present and building relationships with people. Just like what Tony was saying just a minute ago about getting Oracle and all. You build relationships and you have conversations with people. And then just like with this lady in Houston, I had no idea that she had that huge opportunity.
Yeah, you really never know. And I'll put a point on this because I had a speaker who spoke at my Women of Influence event, and we had it was a 2-day event. It was can't even remember where it was, but it was a 2-day event, and one of the speakers said that she made an offer. We had a really great turnout, and the person said, well, only 2 people approached me. And one of the people that she approached, I actually happen to know. And the feedback that I got was that this speaker was really just talking about selling her product or service to her, and she wound up not doing business with her. But the speaker said to me, well, only 2 people approached me out of the 60-some people who were in the room. And I asked her, I said, well, did you follow up with any of those people? And she said, well, no, because I figured if they were interested, they would contact me, which I think is a huge mistake that speakers tend to make. They just sort of assume that if somebody doesn't approach you, that must mean that they're not interested. You've got to cultivate a relationship with people that you want to do business with. right? You've got to pick up the phone. You've got to call people. You've got to set up, meetings with them. I don't meet with a lot of speakers, but I usually will pick up the phone and I will call them and have a conversation with them, just so that we know that we're on the same page, it's a fit, that sort of thing. It's not everybody you meet is somebody you want to do business with. So would you say that particular speaker is a transactional speaker?
What now?
I know that was long-winded. Would you say that the speaker that I described is a transactional speaker?
Totally. And what happens too when you start really looking at, I start building relationships even before I get to a conference. So I'll try to reach out to any of the other speakers on the lineup. I'm connecting them to LinkedIn. I'm connecting on Facebook. I'm messaging them saying, hey, we're both speaking at, Tony's event. I can't wait to get to meet you. Let's chat before, so that way when you show up, you already have built-in crowd of people who love you. And you also can get a vibe of way the whole event, especially if it's an event you've never been to, you don't know anybody at the event. It's a great way to see what the vibe is going to be there. So it also helps you put together your talks even more by just having conversations. You could also, I obviously connect with the event people, whoever I see that's going to be there, the president of the event, whatever. And then I also look and see who's the sponsors and vendors. Because especially if you're putting on your own events, guess what? You need your own opportunity to have vendors and sponsors. Those are great connections, but also those people are usually spending money, so they usually have more money to spend. So I try to connect with as many people before, but then also after.
Absolutely. So I'm going to, and thank you for that. I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions or comments, or if they want to weigh in, please unmute yourself now and see if you all have anything you want to say. And Tanya, while people are doing that, if you can type in your contact information into the chat room so that people know how to reach you and connect with you and that sort of thing. Okay. So, Tanya Parker,
I had a question. Yeah, on the Labor Day half off, is that completely spelled out?
Yeah, and I'm putting it in the.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. So yeah.
Look how pretty you look. Tanya.
Yeah. Oh, you talking to me? Oh.
Yeah, because you were saying you were putting on your lipstick.
She put her lipstick.
Look how pretty you look. Okay. Not that you weren't before, but we didn't say.
Sure.
So there you go.
Be careful about saying things like that.
It's okay.
Tony, I do have a question.
Sure.
Okay. Tanya, I had to step out for just a second, but you really raised the point. There's a whole series of things that we need to understand how to do, and a lot of it's about the process that I know for me, when I first got started, I was missing the boat on a number of ways. Do you have some sort of a track that you put people on that I don't want to call it a course, but maybe that's the best way to call it, where you can teach them, here's the first step, 1, step 2, blah, 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 something that kind of breaks down this whole process, how to start from ground zero, not so much planning the speech, but the business, I'll call it the business side of speaking.
Yeah, I'm actually working on that right now because I've had multiple people wanting me to walk them through it. The problem that I always run into, it's so much information. People have a tendency to get burdened out really quickly. So I'm trying to figure out how to simplify it so that it's doable. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
And Barney, don't let me forget, because I really would love to have you involved with that corporate training opportunity that I'm putting together.
Yeah, I'd like that. Thank you. I've got some new plans on my side of the fence.
Call me.
I will. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Anyone else? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, sounds good. So Tanya Hoffman, thank you so much. Please hang out a little longer if you can, so that we can, we may have some more questions for you and that sort of thing. I'm going to